I am so excited to have Lauren Miller Rogen here with us today. She is co-founder of Hilarity for Charity. And I'm thrilled to be able to talk with you. I love what you're doing in the space. I love how much light and fun actually you bring into a space that can feel so dark, so isolating.
Yeah.
So I really respect what you're doing. So I want to turn it over to you, Lauren. Can you, tell me about you, tell me about your why, and tell me about how Hilarity for Charity came to be.
Yeah. Well, so happy to be having this convo with you. My journey kind of began when I was a kid. Both of my grandparents on my mom's side, both of her parents had dementia. And then when my mom was 52, she started repeating herself. And I sort of had the sinking feeling. And just before her 55th birthday, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And this obviously rocked our family. And, we had just lost my grandmother like 5 years before that. Like it wasn't, we weren't like ready to be going through this with my mom, but there we were. And we were scared and sad. And I was, in my early 20s at this point, almost mid 20s at this point, and felt so alone and, didn't know anyone who was going through what I was going through or could even really understand that well. And just, it made me really dark. And on top of that, my mom didn't want us to talk about it. She didn't want us to tell anyone about it and was really feeling that stigma. And I can understand that totally in her position. She was a teacher for 35 years and she taught kids to read. So the idea of losing control of her mind was terrifying. And so anyway, but eventually we did start talking about it because I'm a storyteller and I couldn't keep it inside. And for better or for worse, her disease advanced and she didn't know that I was talking about it. Seth joined me in a few little things and he was, starting to, have a bit more notoriety at that point. And people were like, what's that guy doing talking about Alzheimer's? And these two young people talking about it. And because, we were in our mid 20s. And so most of the advocates for Alzheimer's at that point were not in their mid 20s, we'll say. And so anyway, so we threw an event raising money for the Alzheimer's Association. And in doing that, ended up connecting with, I would say, a community of other young people who were going through what I was going through. And I was so far from alone, fortunately and unfortunately. And that really helped us sort of shape our mission to give young people a place in this disease and the fight against dementia, to share their stories and to take action and to learn and raise money if they can. And so in 2018, we became our own 501c3 and really sort of, honed in on the work we were trying to do, which I would say, falls under the umbrella of care, which is that we care for caregivers and we teach people how to care for their brains. And that's where the majority of our energy goes is, in seminars and support groups and caregiving and actual respite care for caregivers. And then teaching everyone, but with a focus, of course, on young people. And we can dig into that in a bit, that it is possible to take care of your brain and brain health should be a priority. We should be making time for our brains, right? That's the big picture. And I guess how we generally got where we are today.
So when you and Seth did that first event, did you have in mind that you guys were going to do something? Were you going to have an organization? No. So
no, not at all.
Just what?
Yeah, it was not. I think that and this is what we say, when anyone is like, how do you make a difference? We're on panels about, philanthropy and whatnot. How do you make a difference? And it's doing what was natural to us, which was throwing a comedy event that raised money for Alzheimer's. And the two didn't really go together, of course, but people wanted a night to laugh and young people wanted to connect and they wanted to take action against this thing that had really been affecting them. And there really wasn't a place to go at that point. And so that's what helped us really make our mission clear, which was this is a community that I needed and felt like I could help create and then benefit from. Maybe it was a little selfish, I guess, but
Yeah, no, I hear that. I think a lot
Yeah.
of things that I do as well is a little selfish, but I think being able to share now the learnings is really, fortunate. So I'm getting a lot from
Yeah.
it in that sense.
Yeah.
So did you have a community? Did you feel like you had a community prior to the event and prior to having Hilarity for Charity?
I mean, I found through Lisa's place, Lisa Gibbons, who's been an amazing advocate for dementia caregivers and patients for years and years. I had gone to a support group. It was just like a general support group. So like I was in a group, and I remember there was a guy who was like 60 years old who was in there talking about his mother who was like in her 90s or something. And I was like 23. And I was just like, I didn't say this to him, but I was like, I don't care at all about what you're going through. It could not be more different than what I, as a 23, 24-year-old woman, am going through with losing my mom at this moment. And fortunately, they happened to be starting a young adults group shortly after that. And it was a group of, gosh, we were 10, 12, maybe 15 max. Most of the people were mid to late 20s. And I remember the first time going to the group, and it was the first time I met other people who were in the same situation that I was in. Their parents were in their like early mid 50s, and it was coming for them. And connecting was, I mean, like it's so huge when you're in this terrible, scary spiral of losing your loved one, and suddenly someone else is like, yeah, same. You're like,
Yeah.
and some of those people are still involved with Hilarity for Charity today, by the way. Like a couple of them, when we started, it was, I would say like maybe 6 months or a year into the group was when we decided to do the event. And I was like, and so I told the group, I was like, I think we're going to throw a fundraiser, and a couple of them were like, I want to do it. I want to do it. I want to help. And, yeah, and people are still involved today, and we really connected. But again, I think a lot of that really showed me what I needed to get through and I called myself a caregiver of a caregiver, because my dad was my mom's, main primary caregiver. But that's what I needed. So that's when we created Hilarity for Charity. I really wanted to create that. And that's what we've had online support groups since I think 2014, like long before the pandemic and yada, yada. And those groups were curated for people depending on their situation, because of that one experience I had where I was thrown in this general pool, and I was like, don't care.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
doesn't speak true to you or your
Yeah.
situation. I understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in speaking of I love how Hilarity for Charity is so engaged in your community, right? I just saw that you guys had you just posted like all the June events that you have.
Yeah.
And there's so many great ones where I'm like, I want to get in on that.
Yeah.
There was one that I saw, Laughter, Lunch, and Learn, reframing values and caregiving, meditation for caregivers. I mean, there's just like, there's so much and so many things to be able to tap into.
CareCon, which is this big virtual event we've done for caregivers in the winter. And at the end of this past year, we just sort of had this like room open that ended up just being this like really long conversation. It was just caregivers, it wasn't like moderate, you know what I mean? There wasn't a support group leader in there. It was just sort of like a little forum, if you will. And so we, again, and we have amazing people that are on staff now at Hilarity for Charity. I'm not doing this all on my own, but like listen to that. And we're like, let's create more of sort of like, instead of like a very focused support group with a social worker at the helm, like maybe just more of these like lightly guided things that can give people the space to say what they need or hear what they need, and just observe if they're only comfortable observing. And yeah,
I do love that, which then leads me to, Hilarity for Charity has always felt very rooted for me in Alzheimer's, but tell me if I'm wrong.
Yes, in Alzheimer's, especially because we were a fund within the Alzheimer's Association, and my mom had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So, but that was in 2009. And I don't know what her diagnosis would be today. I know what she had in her brain because we donated it. And she had Parkinson's, Lewy body, and Alzheimer's in her brain. And so, I think that we started rooted in Alzheimer's because that's what her diagnosis was. But over the years, as I've learned more, as all of us at the organization have learned more, I think it's dementia's the umbrella, right? And I think that there are differences, but a lot of similarities. Doctors, you've seen one case of Alzheimer's, you've seen one case of Alzheimer's, and I could replace that with dementia, but there are similarities, and so I think that over the years, especially in the last recent years, we've really just tried to we'll say Alzheimer's and related dementias, to not lose what we were founded on, but to recognize that we're all on this shitty boat together.
Yeah.
We're here to help you also. So,
yeah. It's interesting that it wasn't just one type of dementia, but different.
A beautiful cocktail.
Yeah, sure. But I that makes me think how difficult it is not only to diagnose the type of dementia, but then you could have multiple things happening under the hood at one time. How do you treat that with medications? And
well, it's why we haven't made more progress in the area of medication, because I think the conversations are just starting now in recent years of it probably isn't going to be one medication. It will be a cocktail. And someone like my mom clearly needed a cocktail. I don't think we have the cocktail ingredients ready yet. So, but ultimately, it was.
Yeah. So your organization advocates for caregivers, and you have a caregiver respite program.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So my mom had in-home care for 8 years, I want to say. And it is not cheap. And my family was in a fortunate position that we could afford it. And that is not the reality for the majority of people who are in that position. And, I'm not saying that keeping your loved one at home is always the best situation and the best choice. That's not what we're saying. But if you have chosen to keep your loved one at home, and that is what has worked for you, you as the caregiver are getting no break. You have no respite to go to the grocery store, go to the doctor, get your hair, whatever it is, take a breath. And so, it was through experiencing, the impact that the caregiver made on my dad's life when he was able to have a break, and how lucky we were to afford that. Once we started really making money as an organization, it was okay, what do I want to do to make a difference? And we weren't making the money that was going to find the cure for Alzheimer's. Sometimes I hear that people donated $20 million to have a building and for research. And that's amazing. And I don't want to knock that or whatever, but $20 million is not going to cure Alzheimer's. $20 million would give caregivers who are in the shit right now such an improvement on their lives. And I'm not saying research is important, but I realized that the money we made could make a difference in what was happening to people today. And research is for tomorrow. And I want to help people that are in it right now. And so we created this grant program. We partnered with Home Instead Senior Care, and they have been our partners since then. And we've awarded over 400,000 hours of care to people. And we have there's two grants. So the first one is I want to say is it 50 hours over 3 months or 25 or 3 months? I can't quite remember. But it's a short-term grant. That's a set amount of hours to use over a 3-month period. And then you can reapply after that for the long-term grant, which is 25 hours a week for 6 months, which makes a huge impact in someone's life. And so, we can only fund 20 28, 20 something percent of the applications we receive because we don't make millions and millions of dollars. Well, we make good money, but you know what I mean? We're not making $20 million a year. And so, yeah, and we have a group of people, committee of people who read the applications every month. I was on that committee for the first 3 years, and I've been on a break for the last couple of years because it's a lot, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Reading stories of people who are in great need, and the heartbreak of not being able to help every single person is tough. But the impact we've made is huge. And we get, lovely notes from people thanking us that just say the kindest things, and the type of help, like I mentioned this and stuff before, but like we once got a note from someone who was appreciative because he got to attend a funeral. And like, you don't think that like caregivers, it really is a 24/7 job. Like, especially when someone is getting more and more advanced, you can't leave your loved one alone. And so to give a little respite for a caregiver is huge and makes an impact. So yeah, so that's where we spend a chunk of our money.
Okay, so I also love how you guys focus on the importance of brain health. Can you dive into why you think brain health is important, and how is HFC helping to bring awareness to it?
Yeah. For so long I had no hope. And I was like, it's all darkness. It's all terrible. And when I started learning about brain health and that there were things that we could do to keep our brains healthy, I was like, oh, there's the hope and there's the light. Because science is science, and science has told me that you could potentially delay or maybe even prevent close to 40% of cases. And maybe if you can't prevent them, you could delay them until science, medication, treatments catch up. And, since I've been involved in talking about all this, I've heard the numbers of 15, 16 million people having Alzheimer's by the year 2050. And that's a lot. And perhaps through brain health, that number could be lower. That's what's going to lower that number, is teaching people that are now in their 20s and 30s and 40s how to take care of their brains, because dementia starts in your brain 20 or 30 years before you see a symptom often. And so, it's to learn how to potentially delay it would be huge. And so that's why we, have adopted this as sort of the other side of our work, which is, maybe we can make an impact in the amount of people that will have Alzheimer's or dementia in the future. So we created our 5 brain health habits, which are sleep, nutrition, exercise, mental fitness, which is like learning new things and hobbies and whatnot, and emotional well-being, which is therapy, gratitude, meditation, et cetera, et cetera. It's something that I find that like people are really excited about. And Alzheimer's is a dark disease. We don't have a medication to treat it at the moment. This is an area that people can really, I've found they sort of lean in, you know what I mean? Like they want to know it's not just dark. I find that like, we often say that like Alzheimer's is not like a sexy disease. We don't have babies and we don't have animals. And it's often not like the coolest disease to be an advocate for. But brain health is exciting and it's cool, and people really want to hear about it. And we host these dinners where people just ask endless questions. They want to know all the information. And so we created coursework for high school students and college students, and anyone can take it too, to teach them how to keep their brains healthy, because that's the age you have to start doing it. And it's important for them to learn. Yeah.
When did you guys start diving into the brain health side of it all?
I think it was around 2015 or so. I'm not sure exactly, some give or take. My uncle, my mom's brother, had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and he lived on the East Coast. And my aunt and uncle were like, where do we go? And I was like, okay, let me find out where you go. And I was introduced to Richard Isaacson, who, I emailed just found his email and was like, hi, I have an Alzheimer's organization, blah, blah, blah. So he met my uncle. And then when I was in New York a few months later, I was like, I'm coming to New York. Can I meet you? Can I come to the clinic and see what you're doing? And so I came by, and he tells a story that by the end I was like, take my blood. And I don't know if I actually did that, but either way, I was like, oh, your goal here is to delay or prevent Alzheimer's. You seem to have scientific evidence that it is kind of possible.
Mhm.
I'm in. And that's how I started my own journey and did the deep dive into the genetics, and, started exercising and eating and sleeping and tracking my sleep and all the stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting because Isaacson was one of the first people that I met sort of on this journey who introduced me to this idea of brain health, which I literally had never heard of before.
Yeah.
What is that? Like, what
Yeah.
could that possibly be?
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm pretty up to date on, I would hate to say trends, but like health in general. But, there is never, and to this day, like my general doctor really doesn't talk to me about my brain.
Yeah.
Now I'm a little more specialized and I'm talking to doctors and seeing doctors that are
Sure.
brain focused. But I just think it's such an important conversation that we should be having in our doctor's office and starting young,
Absolutely. Well, and as women, of course, we have another element, which is our hormones. And as we move through, our lives, those things change. And, and the working hypothesis is that my mom's onset happened when it did because she had a hysterectomy at 47 in the 90s. And hormone treatment back then wasn't what it was today. And the combination of her genetics, 2 copies of the APOE4 gene, and the instant removal of her uterus and ovaries, combined with the bad hormones that they gave people back then, made her onset happen when it did. She probably would have gotten it later, no matter what, but happened 15 years before it might have. My uncle didn't start showing signs until he was 66, 67. So.
Still young.
Yeah. Oh, so yes, of course.
Really young. Okay, so speaking of brain, then what are, like, on an average day, tell me a couple of things that you do. Like, so for me, I think about my brain first when I'm exercising, when I'm eating, and I don't do it perfectly, but it's like, if I'm going out for a run, I visualize blood flow going to my brain.
That's good.
I like visualizing that.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you doing? What do you do on a daily basis,
right,
to take care of your brain?
Yeah. I mean, I do a number of things. First is I sleep well. And I really, a number of years ago, once I started tracking my sleep and had a real picture of how I was sleeping, which was not great. I really did everything I could to sort of like make over my sleep routine. And so I have a cooling pad for my bed because I sweat at night. I don't anymore. And I have a weighted blanket. It helps me sleep. I've tried, I don't know, half a dozen sleep masks till I found the right one that was best for me. And now I have a consistent bedtime and I wake up at a consistent time naturally because I have a consistent bedtime. And, I have seen the evidence of my sleep improve and I can feel it also in my daily life. So that's one of the things. The second thing is exercise. I have an exercise routine. I did not before all this. And I really try to sort of mix it up, and I do zone 2 cardio and I do a HIIT workout. Today I was at Orange Theory this morning doing a HIIT workout. I was with my trainer lifting heavy weights yesterday because muscle, especially again for women as we age, so important to have muscle. And I have a routine where I sort of mix it up in, I would say like a way where I feel like I'm getting a differentiated version of exercise, all that is good for my brain. And then I eat pretty well, but I also love food. It's not that I never have cheats. I do have plenty of cheats. But I really put a lot of care into and attention into what I'm putting into my body and try to make good choices. I have hobbies. I go to therapy. I really try to live a lifestyle where I am, on top of all those aspects, sleep, nutrition, exercise, mental health.
I feel like when you lead with brain I'll speak for myself. When I think about my brain and when I'm doing things like what you do, that my whole body benefits.
Yeah.
But if you're thinking about your brain, you're exercising, you're in that zone 2, cardio range, and, it's just so beneficial.
Yeah.
Whole body.
Totally. Yeah, no, I remember like early on with Dr. Eisen, he was like, yeah, I was starting because I was like not really exercise. Well, I was like working out with a trainer a few days a week, and like that was it. And I was like, no, and it like wasn't doing anything because like that's not 2 days a week lifting some weights is not going to do anything. And I remember being like, I'll never get into it. I'll never like exercise. And I do. I like it. So annoying, but I do.
Yeah, it's just kind of like breaking the seal of it, right? Like you just drag my feet in. But once you kind of start building the strength and the stamina, and I love the way I feel after, and it's such a great sort of jolt for my brain that I need.
Yeah.
I just feel so much better after a good workout, a good sweat.
I know.
One of my last questions, for caregivers out there, can you leave off with just some positivity, some hope, just something for caregivers to grasp onto? Like, as we know, it's a very dark, isolating journey. Doesn't matter who you are. It is a very common thread, I think, within the space. What light can you pass today?
I mean, look, it's hard. You know what I mean? Life is constant loss and hardship. And, hopefully you have some lovely moments in between, and caring for a loved one who is going through this is devastating. However, you're still going and you're still there, and to find connection and community for me is what brought light in, and finding other people who could say like, oh my God, I totally know what you mean. My mom the other day, blah, 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 and it's not going to change the situation. It's not going to make your loved one better. And it's not going to make there be a magic pill that makes it all okay. But connecting with another human, feeling understood, feeling seen, feeling recognized for your work as a caregiver, and the heavy load that it is, I think is what got us through, was knowing that like we weren't alone, and that what we were doing mattered, and that someone else out there was gonna understand that.
I love that. Okay, so how can we find Hilarity for Charity? How can we support Hilarity for Charity?
You can find us on all the social medias. Instagram, we are hfc.org. I think that's also our website, actually. You can, message us or email us, go to our website, and all the good information is there about our programs and just ways to get involved.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
Yeah.
You are doing God's work. You guys are doing God's work.
Thank
you for, having a safe place for caregivers to land.
Well, thank you. Thank you for, having these conversations and, bringing a voice to, the people who are going through this. And it's so huge. I think that all of this ends by storytelling, honestly. I think that like the more we share, the more we understand what someone else is going through and their experience, the more we're able to find solutions and support each other and get through it.